Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot tell you just how excited I am for what's inside this box. I know we've seen a lot of gaming monitors this year and a lot of them have really pushed the boat out, but I genuinely think that this one is different for two main reasons. Firstly, and primarily because this uses some brand new OLED technology. It's the 4th generation and it's called Tandem OLED, which does a wonder, really, for gaming monitors. Not only for the OLED side of things is it going to be a lot less susceptible to burn-in, but the main thing for me that's got me really excited is the fact that not only should the image quality be better, and it was already pretty darn good, but fundamentally the brightness on this should be a lot better as well. And then the other thing, and the thing you're probably not expecting if you haven't heard of this before, is that this is actually somewhat affordable. Emphasis on the somewhat, but this is coming in for about £520 at launch, which I don't know about you, but for the next generation of OLED technology that should be so much better than what comes before it, this seems like a bargain. But of course, the only way to actually find out whether this thing is going to be any good is to get it unboxed. Oh, and this is always easier to do when you're not filming, but I wouldn't be very good at my job if I didn't do that. So let's park this to one side for a second and then have a quick reveal. I mean, it's all the usual ROG stuff, so you're going to get most of the cables really that you need. You've got hopefully a very strong and sturdy stand here. This actually uses metal as well, which is quite nice. There'll probably be some other monitors that use the same panel that will come in for a little bit less. And usually I'd kind of say, well, you know, if you like the features, like the design that you're going to get with Asus, it might be worth it. But bear in mind that this monitor actually uses the true black glossy OLED finish that I think is still exclusive to Asus, which is yet another reason why I think that the value for money is excellent here, honestly. I mean, it's not going to suit everyone. I mean, me personally, I want a 32-inch monitor. This is a 27. I want it to have 4K resolution, and this is 1440p. But actually, for what most gamers kind of want and are ultimately going to get the best bang for buck out of, 27-inch is probably the sweet spot for most. This is plastic, by the way. One of the ways they cut corners. Oh, but are you guys ready for the big reveal? And here we go. Oh, I just got the worst static shock I've had in a long, long time. It's a good thing I wasn't close to dropping that. And then remove our protective cover. And ladies and gentlemen, here we go. As I say, our true black glossy OLED, obviously we do have a protective cover on that we'll take off in just a second, but then round the back, it's pretty much business as usual really. You'll notice that the OLED panel obviously is very, very thin, and this being a tandem OLED, I guess in theory the panel itself is slightly thicker, but you're certainly not going to notice, but most of the cooling and the custom Asus heatsink and all of that gubbins is actually located in the back. I would imagine that the stand just drops in completely toollessly, and then there you go, look ladies and gentlemen, your proper next generation OLED gaming monitor has arrived. Let's do a peel. Oh, satisfying, satisfying. Boom. And if you haven't seen a monitor that has this new finish, which again is called True Black Glossy OLED, essentially it tries to kind of bridge the gap really between the benefits of a glossy finish, but without the horrible kind of miscolored reflections that you can get on a traditional glossy. But this definitely is my favorite finish that we've seen. So you absolutely can see some reflections, so you're going to have to control your light. These are obviously very bright studio lights that you can see here, so this is a very extreme example, but you're not getting that kind of purple haze that you'd often see with a traditional OLED. I mean, we can go and grab one just to show you the difference. So this is a 27-inch UCDM, so this is 4K 240 Hertz, and I think the question for you will be, can you notice the difference between the two? Let's both aim it at the same light, and that's going to be the closest example. So reflections in a way are actually going to be worse in theory on our true black, but then they're a lot more kind of true to life. So you can see the purplish hue that you get here that does actually make it look a little bit less bright, but then the image quality that you're going to get on this is just going to be so much better, and as long as you can control the light in your room, it's not going to be a problem. I mean, I use mine in an office, it's very bright. I would have thought too bright, but the monitor is actually facing away from the window, so I have no reflections at all, and even in a bright room, it's been absolutely fine. In case you're interested, inside our goodie bag, we do have an HDMI cable and a single display port, and then we have our USB hub as well as our power. And then as for actual inputs on our monitor, we're probably gonna have to cut to B-roll here. We have two HDMI, a display port, headphone jack, and then our USB hub with two USB-As. So for most gamers, you're gonna be absolutely fine, but if you wanna have one of these I was going to say crazy setups, but let's be honest, more modern setups where you have like a Mac or just a normal laptop that you connect to it over USB-C, well, it's not going to happen on this monitor. Unless you got a converter, but then you wouldn't have the USB functionality, would you? And as we take this opportunity now to get this plugged in and turned on, I do also want to draw your attention to, I think, one of the reasons why for me this went a little bit under the radar, because you may have heard of the bigger brother to this monitor, and it's the ROG version that actually goes up to a whopping, I think it's 740 hertz, only at 720p, which, no offense to Asus, I get why you're marketing this, but let's be honest, it's pretty pointless. Obviously, you're going to be paying more money for that, but then you could argue that you're getting more monitor for your money. It's probably going to have more ports. It's just going to be a little bit more well-rounded. But obviously, you're going to be paying through the nose for that feature. You do get 1440p at 540 hertz, which obviously is basically double what you get on this. But then you still have to argue how many people are actually going to be able to take full advantage of that, and how many of those people are going to be willing to pay the extra money. If that's you, and you can do that, fantastic, that makes sense. But I think this is probably the far more important one really for most people, because as I say, it's in the realm of affordability. It's still a lot of money, but when you think what people will be spending on their RTX 5080, I'd much rather be playing on like a 5070 Ti and then have a monitor like this than just pay more money just for more frames but have an inferior display. Right, but at the moment this feels a bit rubbish because it's only at 60 FPS. It's not even at that, it's 59.95. But we can go all the way up to 240. I thought it went a little bit above that. Do we have to turn this on? Oh, I think it's because it's in power saving mode. I can't say it looks like there's any other settings. So has this changed now? Yes, okay. Well, there you go. If you're missing your 280 hertz or FPS, it's because you need to turn this on in the settings. Oh, and that's even brighter now. That's crazy. It's just so vivid. I've seen so many monitors on this channel, especially this year, and so many of them have really taken things to the next level. But that is genuinely really impressive. That's kind of like going into a TV shop in the old days and seeing that one that's standing out and you go, whoa. That's kind of the effect that we're getting here. But let's have a look at Test UFO. Obviously, this is not the absolute fastest, right? So if you wanted to go for its bigger brother, 720 hertz at 720p, I've seen it in person. It is genuinely impressive, but you know, to your average person, myself included, it's kind of, you know, like 5% better in terms of what you can kind of see and experience. Most of the meat here we have already. 280 hertz only a few years ago was unheard of really, especially on an OLED monitor at these sort of prices. So for everything to have come down and to be able to get a tandem OLED monitor and 280 hertz for, call it £500, I think is remarkable. And this is a really, really great looking image. There's barely any blur whatsoever. The only blur that there is kind of on his eyes. So in terms of what you're actually going to be experiencing in games like Battlefield, where obviously you're not going to be able to run this at above 280 FPS anyway, what is the point of spending all of that money for a 500 hertz display if you're not able to use it? It all comes down to the games that you play and obviously your budget and things, but I think for most people this is clearly going to be the better choice. Oh, but ladies and gentlemen, now's the time to actually test this for gaming and see how it performs. I'm so excited. All we need to do is say a massive thank you to this video's sponsor. Corsair's epic triple chamber case has arrived, bringing next level cooling and stunning panoramic looks. The Corsair Air 5400 utilises a standalone chamber that's dedicated for all-in-one liquid coolers, cleverly diverting the hot air away from your motherboard, graphics cards and SSDs. The main chamber oozes luxury, with its curved tempered glass highlighting all of your prized components and providing a flow-through design to keep your graphics card cool and quiet, with airflow ducts designed to feed air to where it's needed the most. The Air 5400 also features the Rapid Route 2.0 cable management system in the third chamber, letting you easily create a tidy build, and thanks to the new brushed cable grommets, it's now simpler than ever. It comes fitted with either reverse blade RS fans for simplicity, or LXR fans for IQ Link luxury, and it's available in either black or white. Learn more and level up today with a link down below. Oh, but ladies and gentlemen, now comes the time for the most exciting bit where we can actually get hands-on in games and see how this is going to perform. I will say that actually I've tested this a little bit over the last few hours and I've noticed an oddity that I'll talk about a little bit later in the video, which is a bit annoying. Let's jump into some Horizon. And I know, we always test the same scene in the same game. It's so boring. Why are you doing that, PC Centric? The reason we have to do that is obviously so we can get an apples to apples test, so we see in a gaming scenario exactly how this is going to perform. And there's quite a few different modes on this monitor. At the moment, we are actually going to start off with, go down to HDR setting, gaming HDR, but crucially, I've also ticked this little box called adjustable HDR, and I've actually set the brightness to max because I think this is going to give us the most impactful HDR experience, but obviously the downside with this is that it's technically going to be less accurate, but I think for most people it's going to be worth the trade-off. But this is quite a difficult scene actually, and yes, you definitely did get a fair bit of white, kind of, I don't want to say blinding you, but being a lot more impactful than you're going to get on some other displays. And honestly, I test so many monitors, this is definitely standing out as one of the better ones. I mean, it's always a little bit difficult for me as well because I'm used to kind of using, it's a couple of years old now, but the LG G3, which is a really impactful OLED screen. And when you come onto a smaller monitor and ones that just aren't as bright, it's never quite as impactful. But I am not getting that here actually. I mean, this Fire here is just so much brighter than all the other monitors I've tested. I think the most recent one actually was from MSI. This was a 500 Hz QD OLED monitor rather than this one which uses an LG WOLED panel. That's the whole tandem OLED for this latest generation of WOLED. And it's night and day difference. I mean, here it's almost a little bit washed out, it's so bright, but obviously this is a very bright scene. You can obviously adjust it with all of the settings, but if you want something to be properly impactful and really, really bright, even when it's taking up a fair bit of the screen, it's honestly a night and day difference versus pretty much every other OLED monitor that I've tested, which is phenomenal, and it's so glad to see. So let's toggle this to cinema, and you can actually choose between console, cinema, and gaming all within the menu itself without actually like closing down the game. But you'll find that when you swap to display HDR 500, true black 500 actually to be technically correct, if you swap to that mode, then you'll probably find in some games the whole thing will crash, just where the monitor is essentially resetting into this mode and then the game doesn't always like it, and sometimes you'll have to restart it. But this being OLED, you're not only getting the brightness, you're also getting the darks and the blacks as well, just that level of contrast. So you come down here in these tunnels, for instance, and it's just so impactful. It's really, really impressive. And actually in combination as well with that OLED true black glossy finish, it just means that you kind of get a lot more punch and natural contrast to your image. But yeah, there's no doubt about it. When it comes to HDR performance, hands down, this is the best gaming monitor I've ever tested. But rightio then, ladies and gentlemen, let's do ourselves a Taylor and press swiftly on.
I made that joke not that long ago, so it doesn't hold up really, does it?
But anyway, a game that did hold up all the way through and I actually really enjoyed was this one. It's some Indiana Jones, and you'll probably notice that this is a game that is just naturally quite bright. You do tend to be outside quite a lot, and you can definitely notice that once again that this is a step up versus previous generation monitors, but I wouldn't say it's anywhere near like the crazy boost to peak brightness really that we were seeing in the previous game. It does vary and it does depend, because clearly as soon as you get a bit more contrast, where obviously we're now on the shade and you've got the kind of bright sunshine over here, this is when it is still very, very impactful, and you can absolutely tell that this is a great HDR display. But when you move into it, it still looks good, but it just doesn't really have the impact. But obviously some of that is just down to the nature of what HDR is, right? But I think if you were playing on a monitor that could get brighter, this probably would look even more impactful. But there's no denying it still looks fantastic, and being 1440p, okay, it's not as sharp as 4K, it doesn't have that extra bit of pop and that extra bit of detail, but it's still plenty sharp enough, even with DLSS enabled like we have here, for the whole thing just to look fantastic actually. But crucially, the input lag is very low on this, and you have a lot of Asus specific features as well. Again, in no way sponsored, but I've got to say I think they're just doing a fantastic job with monitors at the moment. You've got like an anti-flicker mode, but the thing for me that I really love, and this is more of like a work feature really, is this setting here called uniform brightness. So if you turn this on, it's not going to be used for HDR, that would be pretty pointless, but if you turn this on in the desktop, it just kind of reduces the amount of drastic brightness shift that you might get just by moving windows around. It does limit the overall brightness if you use uniform brightness, but it does just kind of even this out just to make it a lot more usable in the desktop. But yeah, definitely so far, so good. Let's try some multiplayer. And this is definitely a title that is pretty intense. This is some Battlefield 6. This was actually a review code that was supplied by EA, so a massive thank you for those guys for actually supplying this. But this is going to be pretty much, I'd say, one of two types of multiplayer games. So you've got ones like this that are very difficult to drive, do need a decent PC, and you're typically going to get a decent frame rate but nothing crazy, or you're going to be playing your more esportsy games, maybe like your Apex Legends, CSGO, Fortnite, anything really that you can get higher frame rates. Those are the titles where it may well be worth considering that 540 Hz display, because you'll be able to take full advantage of it, whereas something like this, I think it's a lot more unlikely. But of course the real question is, how does this monitor perform in Battlefield? Is it a pleasure to use. I mean, the main thing as well is that if you do have a decent frame rate that you can input to this, then obviously you're going to take full advantage of the response time of OLED. So when you kind of move the mouse around, as long as you've got motion blur turned off, everything is going to be super sharp, which genuinely can help, especially in something like this where everything is quite grey and murky. So actually kind of spotting people in the distance isn't always the easiest thing, especially when you're kind of moving around. So it really does matter to be able to obviously have a little bit more kind of clarity to the image. This here is also a fantastic example of what your tandem OLED can do in terms of HDR. We have this fire here and it just looks a lot more bright really, and a lot more kind of impactful than you would get on a monitor that just couldn't deliver the brightness regardless of whether it's OLED or LCD. But clearly you're not going to get any of that kind of like ghosting or smearing or any of that kind of trailing that you often get with like a mini LED monitor, where you have like all of these different lighting zones, but they kind of like bloom through into each other. So sometimes it's quite prone to artifact and things. It does depend on the game, but I always think as well, if you've got all of these little zones, if they're not quite fast enough to kind of like match your game and you're moving around quickly like this, it's going to be very, very difficult for an LCD to compete really. And when you combine it with the clarity that you're going to get from the OLED, and as I say, the input lag and just the 280 frames a second. I mean, how have we suddenly got to the point where 280 frames a second is, oh, well, you know, it's not that fast. 280 frames a second is massively fast. And I think for most people, even this is overkill. I think, you know, 165 or something would be fine. I mean, case in point, the monitor I'm using at the moment is 4K, 165 frames a second. I mean, it just ticks all of the boxes. The image quality is great, the clarity is fantastic, the input lag is fantastic, and obviously the price, I think, is very, very appealing. Well, well, well then everyone, how about that? This is perfect timing as well. This is that proximity sensor I told you about. I've not been in front of the screen for a second, so it turns off, and as soon as you go in front of it, comes back. I hadn't planned that, but that's fantastic. I've got to say that this is genuinely, I think, the most impressive monitor I've tested in a long, long time. Crucially as well, because it does hit that more affordable price point. This is not like a £1,000, £2,000 display. This has cutting edge technology, but it's actually available, obviously not for everyone, but certainly in terms of monitors for a relatively affordable price in the realm of high-end OLED. So I'm really pleased. I think the brightness on this is definitely a massive step forward. So this is way better for HDR gaming than every other OLED monitor I've tested before. It's obviously not as sharp as a 4K. It's not 32-inch, it's not ultra-wide. So I wouldn't buy one personally for me, because I just need that higher resolution because I want it for work and for movies and things like that. But I think for most people, especially as well in combination with that true black glossy OLED coating that they put on this, I think it's a fantastic all-round package, and it's very, very difficult to find any flaws in it whatsoever. Apart from arguably the big one, this monitor out of the box had some severe uniformity issues, and the way I've described this is it's kind of like on a certain shade of grey, the image would kind of just break up and look a little bit moire-y, as if you had a coating on the screen, but it wasn't. It was actually the kind of panel itself. And I will say that I've spoken to a few different people about this, most notably Simon from TFT Central. Big up Simon, check him out, link down below if you don't already follow TFT Central, because his unit kind of experienced some similar things, but also kind of different as well. And he suggested that I use the cleaning program a couple of times to actually improve things, and it did, which was great. Not to the point where the image is now pristine, is perfect, but clearly running the cleaning program a few times has helped. But it's still a bit weird, because clearly with this particular panel there is some uniformity issues that may or may not occur depending on the exact unit that you get. I can say this because if you watched Hardware Unboxed video on the latest 720p 720Hz version of this with the same panel, he found the opposite thing. He had that issue on the higher end model, but then said that his version of their Strix one, it didn't exhibit this at all. So that's why it's a little bit of a lottery really, but I can definitely still notice on Steam, it's weird. I've tried different refresh rates, different resolutions, DSC on, DSC off, HDMI cable rather than DisplayPort. But if you are having this problem, run the cleaning cycles a few times and see if this helps to clear it up. It may well do, it might get better over time as you use the display, or it might just be something that you have to live with. But I will say that this only really affects the monitor when you're looking at very specific shades of like the whole screen. So in gaming scenarios or anything like that, it's very unlikely to rear its ugly head. I haven't seen it in any of my gaming testing. It is purely just when you've got like a horrible kind of grey gradient and it just kind of can't really handle it very well. But I will talk to Asus, and I'll leave a pinned comment if I get any information from them, maybe it's something that could be improved with a firmware update potentially. But I think if it is just the panel itself, other than using the cleaning program, I'm not entirely sure what could be done about it. But assuming you don't suffer from this issue either too badly or at all, it's so easy to recommend. This is probably the product of the year. Again, for the price point, I think this is absolutely phenomenal. And I'm just so glad that like next generation monitors can get into people's homes once again for a relatively, emphasis on relatively, affordable price. Really hope you've enjoyed this though. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this. Get yourself subscribed. And of course, if you do want to check out current pricing on this monitor or any of our favorites, you can find them all listed down below with our affiliate links. But thank you guys so much for checking this out. We'll catch you in the next one.